The masculine soul starves in comfort. There is a curve most people never see. It does not appear on a map. No compass needle twitches when you approach it. You do not recognize it the moment you cross it. But every man, sooner or later, feels the chill. It begins in the bones. A slow, aching awareness. A question that doesn't ask itself in words, but in restlessness. In the long stare at the ceiling before sleep. In the strange heaviness of easy days. The masculine soul starves in comfort, not all at once, not with drama or great noise, but slowly, softly, like moss over stone. It begins when the boy is told, "Stay inside, it's raining." When the wild urge to climb, to hunt, to yell, is tamed, praised for vanishing. When he learns that softness gets him approval, that edge gets him silence, and so he hides the edge. He buries it deep, and the burial is applauded. The teachers call it maturity. The women call it sensitivity. The workplace calls it professionalism. But something ancient, something bearded and barefoot inside him, begins to howl. He doesn't hear the howl at first. He hears tiredness. He hears "I'm fine." He hears nothing. Comfort is so quiet. It wraps around the soul like a wool blanket on a still day. No danger, no cold, no purpose. Comfort says, "You've made it." But the soul whispers, "Made it where?" You see, men do not die from chaos. They die from numbness. They do not starve from poverty. They starve from meaninglessness. I have sat by many fires. I have spoken with men whose hands have held rifles and others who've only held phones. And I tell you this, it is not violence that haunts the masculine soul. It is the absence of initiation, the absence of the wound. Every man at some point needs to be cut open, not by blade, but by truth, not by accident, but by ritual. But in a world of comfort, there is no ritual. There is only Netflix, and distraction, and scrolling, and soft lights, and cold pizza, and an ache behind the ribs. A man who has not been broken open is not yet a man, only an older boy, walking carefully through adulthood, avoiding the cracks in the sidewalk, afraid of falling into himself. And so we come back to the curve, that invisible bend in the road of a man's life, where something in him says, "This is not it." He may not know what it is, but he knows this is not it. The job, the couch, the praise, the porn, the paycheck, the soft silence of small talk. None of it feeds the lion. That's the thing about comfort. It doesn't scream. It doesn't hit. It doesn't force. It seduces. It keeps the body alive, while the soul withers. I've seen it in their eyes. Men in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Perfect teeth, fine skin, clever words. And eyes like cold ash. No fire. No war dance. No myth. Just a quiet dying. The masculine soul, when well fed, does not need to conquer, but it needs to serve something larger than itself. And comfort serves nothing. It only offers delay. Another hour, another series, another year, until one day he cannot remember the last time he shouted, the last time he wept, the last time he stood naked in the storm and said, "I am here. I am alive. Strike me if you must, but I will not stay numb." The world today calls that madness, but the old ones, the ones who sat in caves, who danced with bone masks, who bled beside fires, they would call it the beginning. The soul begins where the comfort ends. And most men never arrive. Because the curve, most people never see it, but you can feel it. It feels like forgetting something sacred. It feels like you've outgrown your own skin. It feels like an invitation and a warning. A boy becomes a man, not through birthdays, not through keys to a car, not through applause. He becomes a man when something breaks, and he chooses not to run. But if nothing ever breaks, if life stays clean, smooth, comfortable, then the boy remains, wearing a mask that fits well in the office, but burns in his sleep. You see, the soul has its own appetite, and it does not feast on praise. It does not fill itself with compliments or credentials. It feeds on edge, on pain endured with meaning, on friction, on initiation. But today we have no elders, only algorithms, no rites of passage, only graduation parties. So where does a man go when he is full of rage, but has no war? When he is full of questions, but hears only slogans? When he longs to serve something, but finds no altar? He goes inward, and that is the forest most fear, because in that forest there is no one to impress, no titles, no followers, just the wind and the wolves, and the voice that has been calling since he was small. But we were not taught how to listen to that voice. We were taught how to silence it, with beer, with women, with humor, with work, with being a good guy, with comfort. But there comes a night, it always comes, when none of it works, when the mask grows heavy, when the body lies in bed but refuses to rest, when the silence is louder than the noise, when the forest calls, and you realize you've never really left the house. You've been sitting in a room, watching shadows, calling it life, and the forest. The forest is not on any map. It begins the moment you stop pretending. There are no signs at the entrance, only a feeling, a pressure in the chest, a soft panic behind the eyes. And that is the curve, that bend in the inner path. Most will feel it and turn away, because it asks too much. It asks for the ego. It asks for the plan. It asks for the comfort you've built your whole life around. But if you step forward, if you take one trembling step into the darkness, you might find the fire, the real one, not the artificial glow of achievement, not the flicker of someone's approval, but the fire that makes your blood sing, the fire that burns away the masks, the fire that leaves you naked, howling, reborn. But let me warn you, the forest is not friendly. It doesn't care how smart you are, or how successful. It doesn't care about your muscles, your abs, your charm. It doesn't want your resume. It wants your honesty, your brokenness, your unfiltered, unedited, unguarded heart. And that is the beginning. The masculine soul cannot be built in sterile rooms. It cannot be taught in classrooms. It cannot be handed down in books. It must be carved from within, with risk, with pain, with loneliness, and yes, with failure. But failure is not the enemy. In comfort, it is. But in the forest, failure is the gatekeeper. It tests your hunger. It checks your pulse. It asks, do you really want to wake up? Because waking up is not a one-time act. It is a death of the boy who waited, a death of the man who performed, a death of the mask that smiled too long. And beyond that death is the wild one, the man who remembers who he is, not because someone told him, but because he went looking into the dark, into the ache, into the myth. That is where the masculine soul begins to eat again. Not snacks of distraction, but meat. Real, red, ancient meat. There is a hunger in men that is older than time, older than cities, older than laws. It is not a hunger for food, nor for power, nor for women. It is a hunger for meaning, for depth, for belonging to a story larger than oneself. But comfort whispers lies. It says, you are enough as you are. You don't need to face the storm. Stay safe. Stay warm. Stay small. And the soul listens, because comfort is a mother's voice. Soft, gentle, persuasive. But the soul also knows, deep down, that the mother's voice cannot live forever. There is a curve in every man's life where the mother's voice fades and the silence grows. At that curve, the man faces a choice. He can stay wrapped in blankets, stuck in easy words and safe habits, or he can step out into rain, into fire, into the cold. Most stay wrapped, few step out, and the few who step out, they become strange. They become wild. They become dangerous to comfort. Because comfort is the opposite of growth. Comfort is the enemy of the masculine soul. Think of the wolf. The wolf does not live in comfort. It lives in forests, in storms, in hunger. It is fierce. It is real. The wolf's life is not easy. It is sharp and urgent and bloody, but it is alive. The modern man, sitting in his climate-controlled box, is no wolf. He is a creature of another kind, a creature that trades its hunger for a thermostat. But the soul remembers, and sometimes it wakes up in the night, howling for the wild, not for violence, not for conquest, but for something sacred. The soul knows the difference, and here lies the deepest paradox. The masculine soul starves in comfort, because comfort is a slow poison. It softens the edges. It numbs the senses. It dulls the fire. It makes a man a shadow of himself. And yet, comfort is so seductive, so kind, so quiet. It does not shout. It does not threaten. It only asks one thing. Stay. Stay small. Stay safe. Stay asleep. But the soul will not stay. It will stir. It will rise. It will call. And the man will hear it, if he dares. Dare to listen. Dare to walk toward the storm. Not because the storm promises safety, but because it promises truth. There is a curve most people never see, but you can choose to see it. You can choose to follow the howl, because the howl is not pain. It is a signal, a call to awaken. An awakening is the only real gift. We live in a world of soft walls and soft beds, soft voices and softer truths. The very air we breathe is cushioned, filtered, packaged, and the man inside begins to shrink. He forgets the sound of his own footsteps on dirt. He forgets the weight of rain on his skin. He forgets what it means to be hungry, not just for food, but for something fierce. There is a curve where ease becomes a cage. You see, comfort is not the absence of struggle. It is the absence of struggle with meaning. A man can have a good job, a warm bed, a loving family, and still starve, because the hunger inside is not always seen. It does not roar. It is a quiet gnawing, a slow loss of something essential, the soul's breadcrumbs. And in this hunger, the man feels lost. Not lost in the world, but lost in himself. He looks in the mirror and sees a stranger with tired eyes, a stranger who nods politely, but does not remember how to roar. The world applauds his politeness. It praises his calmness. But the soul is restless. There is a curve most people never see, and it feels like an old wound opening. It is the wound of longing, the wound of separation, the wound of a soul starving in comfort. No one talks about it. No one sees it. But it is there, under the suit, under the carefully constructed smile, under the polished speech. The hunger is ancient. It has walked through the forests of men since the beginning of time. It is the hunger for initiation, for the sacred break, for the passage through fire. But the fire has been replaced by fluorescent lights. The initiation replaced by meetings and emails. The hunger waits. It waits in the silence between tasks. It waits in the quiet moments when no one is watching. And then it speaks. It does not speak loudly. It whispers. It beckons. It asks, "What have you forgotten?" And the man, even the man wrapped in comfort, feels the pull. He feels the call to step beyond the curve, the call to break the surface of his own life, to be seen, not by the world, but by himself, to remember the wildness in his blood, to remember the song that lies beneath the noise. This is the ancient question, not how do I succeed, but who am I beyond the comfort? Because comfort is a thin skin. It cannot hold the depths. The masculine soul grows in the depths, in the dark, in the cold, in the rain. It grows when a man stands naked in the storm and says, "I am here. I am real. I am not afraid." And that is the curve, that invisible bend where the boy becomes a man, where the soul begins to eat again. There is a moment, a thin, sharp moment, when a man realizes he is not the hero of the story he has been telling himself. This realization is both terrifying and liberating, because all his life he has been climbing a ladder, built from expectations, desires, and social scripts. And suddenly the ladder ends, not with a triumphant landing, but with an empty space. The curve most people never see is this moment of emptiness. It's not failure. It's not defeat. It is a clearing, a quiet space where all the old stories fall away. Here, there is no applause, no judgment, no distraction, only the man and his soul. And the soul asks questions that cannot be answered with words, questions that cut deeper than any blade. Who are you when no one is watching? What do you carry that is yours alone? What fire burns beneath your skin? In the comfort of modern life, these questions are muffled, softened by busyness, smoothed over by convenience. But the soul remembers, and it waits, like a wolf crouched in shadow, ready to pounce when the moment comes. That moment arrives not in triumph, but in loss. Loss of control, loss of certainty, loss of the mask, and loss is the midwife of awakening. The comfortable man fears loss. He fears the dark. He fears the silence. But the wild man knows that loss is a door to the deeper self. Behind that door lies the pain of truth, but also the power of knowing. To walk through loss is to be reborn, to stand naked in the storm, to be stripped of pretense, to be touched by raw reality. And in that rawness, the masculine soul feasts, not on comfort, but on truth, not on safety, but on challenge, not on quiet, but on the roar of life itself. So when the comfortable man feels the hunger, when he notices the ache beneath his ease, it is a call to remember to remember the curve, the moment when the boy must become a man, not by climbing, but by falling into himself. This is the path of depth, the path of spiritual maturity. It is a path few take, because it demands everything, but it gives everything in return. The hunger is not a curse. It is a summons, and the soul, starved in comfort, waits for the feast. Imagine a man seated by a fire, the rain tapping gently on the roof, the night wrapped in silence and shadows. This man has walked far, not through cities, but through the landscapes of his own soul. He has carried wounds no one sees, wounds disguised as tired smiles, as quiet resignations, as the weight of endless shoulds. Comfort held him tightly for a time, a soft embrace that dulled the edges. But the fire inside never went out. It simmered beneath the ashes of his daily life. And now, at this curve, the place most men never visit, he listens. He listens to the silence between his thoughts. He listens to the ache beneath his skin, the ache that says there is more. More than meetings, more than small talk, more than the polite mask. The masculine soul craves depth, not depth found in achievement or recognition or conquest, but the depth of being, the depth that comes from standing in the storm, naked and unafraid, and saying simply, I am here. I am enough, not because I have earned it, but because I exist. This is not a comfortable place. It is a wild place, a place where the lines between pain and growth blur, where the hunger and the feast are one. And the man learns to hold paradox. He holds the pain of longing without trying to fix it. He holds the silence without filling it. He holds the wildness without taming it. In this holding, he begins to heal, not by running from discomfort, but by sitting with it, by allowing himself to be broken open, so something new can be born. The world wants men who are polished, who perform, who produce. But the soul wants a different kind of man, a man who is whole because he has known brokenness, a man who is wise because he has faced confusion, a man who is free because he has been bound. This is the journey beyond the curve, and it is a lonely journey because few understand, because few remember. But the man by the fire does not seek their understanding. He seeks his own, and in the quiet of the rain, he finds it. There is a deep and ancient rhythm to becoming a man, not the rhythm of clocks or calendars, but the rhythm of the earth beneath your feet, the rhythm of seasons turning, the rhythm of blood and breath. But comfort interrupts this rhythm. It smooths the rough edges. It silences the call of the wild. And the man forgets how to listen. He hears only the noise of obligations, the hum of devices, the endless chatter of distraction. And the soul, starved for depth, grows quiet. It is easy to mistake this quiet for peace. But peace is not silence. Peace is the sound of a river flowing through the heart, not the absence of sound. The masculine soul thirsts for that river. It thirsts for the fierce current that carves the stone, for the wildness that shapes the forest. But in comfort, the river dries, the forest stills, and the man begins to shrink. He becomes a shadow of what he could be, a man who smiles but does not laugh, a man who speaks but does not sing, a man who lives but does not burn. There is a curve where this shrinking turns to breaking, a place where the soul can no longer bear the weight of its own quiet. And in that breaking, there is a choice: to remain a shadow, to drift in the numbness, to forget the fire, or to rise, to remember the rhythm, to stand in the storm, to howl with the wolves. This rising is not easy. It is not quick. It is a lifetime's work. But it is the only way to feed the starving soul, because the soul does not hunger for comfort. It hungers for life, for danger, for love, for truth. And only when a man answers that hunger, not with more distractions, but with presence, does the soul begin to feast again. There is a curve most people never see, but it is there, waiting, calling. There is a silence that follows the storm, a silence not empty, but full. It is the silence of a man who has been broken open, not by violence or defeat, but by truth, by the kind of truth that cannot be spoken, only felt. This silence is a sacred place. It is the curve where the old man dies, and the new man is born. In comfort, this silence is feared. It is mistaken for loneliness, for failure, for despair. But it is none of these. It is the threshold, the place where the soul sheds its skin, where the masks fall away, where the fire within can finally breathe. To reach this silence, a man must first walk through fire, through his own fears, his own pain, his own doubts. This journey is not for the faint of heart. It demands everything, and it gives everything, because in this silence, a man finds himself, not the self shaped by society, by expectation, by comfort, but the wild self, the deep self, the eternal self. This self is not loud. It does not demand. It simply is. And in this being, the masculine soul is nourished. It no longer starves. It feasts on mystery, on presence, on being alive in a world that often feels dead. The curve most people never see is the path to this silence. It is a path walked by few, but it is the path home, to the fire, to the rain, to the soul. There is a story told in the silence of ancient forests, a story that men have heard since the beginning of time. It is the story of the hunt, not the hunt for prey, but the hunt for self. The boy leaves the village. He walks into the wild alone. He faces the darkness, the cold, the fear, and in that facing, he finds himself. But today, the wild is not a forest. It is the unknown inside us, the place we avoid with busyness, distraction, comfort. But the hunt calls still. It calls to the masculine soul starving in ease. And the call is simple. Step forward. Step forward even if you tremble. Step forward even if the way is unclear. Step forward even if you are afraid, because the soul knows its own hunger. It will not be fed by comfort. It will not be satisfied with ease. It will feast only on truth, on risk, on life lived fully, with all its scars and shadows. The curve most people never see is the edge of this hunt. It is the moment when a man stops waiting, stops hoping, stops hiding, and says, I will walk my own path. I will face my own darkness. I will find my own fire. This is not a promise of glory. It is a promise of being real, of being present, of being alive. The masculine soul starves in comfort, but it can feast in truth. Here, by the fire's edge, beneath the quiet rain, the journey finds its pause, not an end, but a deep, slow breath. The curve most people never see is not a place on a map. It is not a milestone marked by others. It is an inner turning, a sacred bending, where the man meets himself, not as a polished image, not as a story told by society, but as a raw, imperfect being. The hunger that once starved in comfort now feeds on presence, on the breath taken in the cold, on the silence held without fear. This is the fire that burns without burning out. This is the wildness that sings without screaming. The masculine soul is not a prize to be won. It is a landscape to be walked. It is a river that flows, sometimes calm, sometimes wild. It asks nothing but honesty, nothing but courage, nothing but the willingness to face the curve. The world may offer comfort, but the soul demands more than ease, more than safety, more than distraction. It demands truth, and in truth there is freedom. Freedom to be whole, freedom to be broken, freedom to be both light and shadow. The masculine soul starves in comfort, but it awakens in presence. It awakens in the wild, in the fire, in the rain. So lean into the curve, lean into the hunger, lean into the becoming, because this is your story, your fire, your life, and it is waiting.